Alrighty, welcome to the Bevry channel. This week we'll be discussing the Social Dilemma movie that's been on Netflix and became quite popular last year. It's a movie about digital privacy and why personalized advertising isn't the be all and end all. So I'm joined here today by Piotrek, a fellow digital nomad and technologist who's actually spent time all. Oh, hold up. I had the live stream back before in another tab, so at least now I know the audio works. Yeah, so Peertrack, joined by him today, fellow digital nomad and technologist, and he's traveled a lot through different countries and kind of realized how uh, law and just culture can affect the outcomes of a nation, especially when it comes to things like censorship. And myself, founder of Bevry, just like Piotrek, a digital nomad and technologist, and been focused my work efforts on decentralized technology for the last few years. So the movie Social Dilemma, it's they have a fictional storyline as well as a non-fictional storyline. And the fictional storyline kind of works to provide a nice narrative of a family of how these concerns that these ex Facebook employees are actually raising. So the non-fictional one is all these ex Facebook, ex Google engineers who have realized that their good intentions have actually led to some bad outcomes. So the movie combines the narrative or the explanations of the engineers with sharing their concerns with the concerns kind of played out. The fictional characters, there's three children, uh, two kind of older teenagers and one younger teenage. The older boy, his main tools are kind of like Facebook and Reddit, and he kind of gets distracted from goals in his own life, such as building harmonious relationships and empowering himself into just kind of more and more political awareness, more and more political evangelism, and kind of ends up getting radicalized to an extent. Whereas the young teenage girl, she is mostly an Instagram, Snapchat user, very much akin to many teenage girls in terms of the gender differences of the different platforms. And she takes the feedback that she gets very seriously, like that one little negative comment really matters. Uh, and kind of goes into her impacts there. And we've probably heard before about issues with how people who use social media or social news websites end up getting more depressed because the pool that we compare ourselves to is much higher. And also for the political side, it's easy to kind of feel like we don't have control over our lives. And to an extent, how much of that is an illusion versus truth is kind of interesting. Um, so to enter into the discussion, we have maybe 10 discussion points that we'll go into over the next hour or so. And and but the theme of the movie outlines 5 points which kind of shows the problems. So we all know the advertisement model. It's Google's model, which is personalized ads. That seems great. I get to get recommendations of what I want. When I search Google, I get to get recommendations of what I would probably want. So it's better that to get, if I'm interested in bikes, better see bikes than seeing scooters. However, what the advertisement model is it's selling changes to your behavior. So they know that seeing an advertisement will likely get you to buy that advertisement. There's a dollar price to that attention, to a percentage, right? Like even if it's like a 10% of people who see the advertisement, or even like 1% or 0.1%, they can figure out how worth that is, and then put a dollar value on it. So what advertisement is it's buying changes to people's behavior. And that's also why politicians use social media now. And why Cambridge Analytica was one of the big data privacy mining firms for the presidential races in, or I think, the UK and America. So uh, the bidding issue is where you're as a consumer, people are now buying to manipulate your behavior, and through buying what your attention sees. And this can have very nefarious purposes when it comes to uh, who is the largest bidder. And now it's nation states or even to some extent uh, foreign nation states that wish to do harm. So in the 2016 political election in America, there was a lot about Russia propaganda. But what was the Russia propaganda? And a lot of it was buying paid for advertising to manipulate what people see, to change their behaviors one by one. There's a book called Persuasion, um, which the Dilbert founder likes a lot. And it talks about how even for charity stuff, if you increment people's association to a charity, then they're more likely to engage with it eventually. So you can do something innocuous like putting a I'm a good person sticker on someone's door. And then they'll think I'm a good person. Then a month later, you put like I'm a charitable person on their door. And then they'll think they're a charitable person. And then you try and solicit a donation and it actually manipulates the behavior. So the movie goes in a great detail on those issues. Tristan Harris is the main person in it, but there's also another one called Jaron Lanier, and he was the one who really drilled home the political points. We've also talked more about on the Bevry channel the issues of this overwhelming of information in the digital age. In our previous live stream where we discussed the paper, Is the First Amendment Obsolete? I'll link to that in the description below once the live stream's ended, and you can check that out to more detail on kind of the more or abstract concerns that are actually making real impacts in people's lives. With that, we have several discussion points. And I'll hand it off to Piotrek to kind of share his big takeaways and the things he wants to talk about the most.
Thank you, Ben. Yeah, definitely Social Dilemma is this one big documentary that we definitely recommend you to watch. I've also written a quite long article about what to do after watching this documentary, because I believe there is a lot of practical choices that everyone of us can do in our daily life to focus more on stuff that really works for our benefit and for the benefit of the people in our region or even internationally, like this collaborative spirit to make just the day better, to make the situation better for all of us. Where should we start, Ben? From which point?
Yeah, so one of the things I thought about in the movie was you have, Google and Facebook, they offer like 120K USD for like a junior position, and then it goes up to an unlimited amount, depending on how scarce your skills are. And concerns with Facebook have always been around for a long time, and I've been and they pretty much, if you get noticed, if you're good at tech, you'll get recruiters trying to hire you. And for me, I try to get hired, and I was like, no, I'm quite concerned by your practices. I think I'll try and work for different companies instead, ones that I align more with ethically. And it's concerned me where a lot of people will go to work for these companies, but these companies, they provide a great career trajectory. You can go straight out of college, and then you've got like a lifetime there and instant recognition, instant validation. And I think a lot of times it's kind of like, is things as bad as it is? Like, these are products that affect billions of people. Like, surely something that, prolific is well regulated and people are doing things correctly. And the movie goes into like all these people who kind of thought that, these engineers, and then they did become jaded. And it was kind of interesting because initially I was like, well, shouldn't they have developed a conscience beforehand, before they worked there? However, I kind of realized that wasn't really charitable for myself because, there's so many also benefits to these companies into the services. Like, they are great ways of social tools and whatnot. And I think there is like especially in the US, it's just kind of like probably a no-brainer to work there. So I think for the movie, it is kind of also targeted, like the nonfiction stuff is kind of like a little bit where they're getting all these authorities to kind of say, no, this is a real concern. And maybe we, like, everyone needs to think about this: politicians, users, engineers. They all kind of need to think about these problems because they are serious problems that maybe not just the engineers in Silicon Valley should be thinking about. That maybe us overall should have more awareness over these issues and how they affect our own lives or the lives of our users, and kind of imbuild that into the product. We did a previous live stream on Bevry about the book Ordinary Men, one of Jordan Peterson's recommended materials. And in that, there's Police Battalion 101, a random sample of Nazi Germany citizens. So not really ideologues, not really any age group, all sorts of different profiles. And they went and ended up killing, through indoctrination and orders, 5,000 Jews over their 2 or 4 year deployment. So it was actually taking ordinary people from the civilization and turning them into killers. And the first, I think, 3/4 of the book is a historical accounting. And then the last quarter of the book is a explanation of how and why this happens. So there's things like Hannah Arendt's work, which is like delegation of responsibility. There's also where it's like, I was just told to push the button. It's not my fault. I was just ordered to. Or things like how with dissent or ethical decisions, about 5% of people are vocal dissenters, 15% of people are silent dissenters, so they would still shoot but miss. And then there's 30% of people who will just care about winning the game. They don't care about ethics at all. They just want to win. And then you have 50% who will go along with the majority. And so what they found is if you eliminate or evict the 5% of dissenters, then you win over everybody, except the silent dissenters. So you'll win over 80% of the population by evicting the vocal dissenters. And that's really quite something. But it introduces like an ethic called technocracy, which is kind of like, I'm just the middleman. In the New Testament, there's also a story about a person who was a middleman. He was a trader, and he ended up trading for the rebels as well as the Romans. And through his conversations with the Jesus evangelists and everything, he was like, okay, maybe funding the arms and funding the warfare with my tools, maybe that's not the right thing. Maybe some principles have to come higher. And I think that's kind of part of this, which is to avoid becoming an ordinary man or engaging in horrific acts. One of the things we have an obligation to do is engage with thoughts of how we can become better people and be aware of things that kind of affect us. And that's a gradual process. No one's ever going to be perfect on that. It's just one of the things we kind of have an obligation to do as citizens who want to operate with other citizens, rather than just be selfish individuals operating on our own moral compass. Yeah. So
I think, yeah, definitely the conscious as a integral part of being alive, of being human to other human beings is crucial. But I also think that there is no such thing as a universal morality. Different cultures would see different acts as punishable, and of course we can find some like common denominators that, for example, in almost every culture on earth, killing and stealing is considered punishable. But then there is a question of what is the punishment? Yeah, like how severe should we push, or should we put those people in jail, or kill them, or do something else to stop this bad behavior, to of course influence other people not to follow the same path. And with technology, we are, I think, in a very interesting, like pivotal moment where the majority, in a sense of like the scale of what we do in our everyday life, how we earn money, how we store money, how we go, do our everyday activities. Everything is somehow related to the technology that we are choosing consciously or unconsciously. Yeah. So once we hit this moment when, okay, we are all connected, we all have something to say here, we all have some power in our hands, then there is the next phase. Yeah, now we are in this moment when I do believe that those simple elements in the background, in, for example, the push of HTTPS, yes, so ensuring that connection to most of the websites online are now encrypted, is something that happened only after Edward Snowden revealed how NSA works. And this was kind of like a small thing for him to do. Of course, like he paid a high price for it. But since then, we actually see in some statistics about how secure the web is, that most of the websites now has this, SSL certificate, while before they didn't have it. And it is almost invisible, yeah, for an average person to recognize. Oh, is the website, better, or is the internet better? And in some degree, it is better, yeah, because now at least your transaction, if you are buying shoes online, the payment, the whole process is more secure, at least for the people who would try to somehow intercept those details. But of course, now we should go a step further. How actually can we go to the mainstream? Yeah, go to most of the people to help them encrypt their messages and try to hide it even for the ISP, the internet service provider, or hide it from Google or hide it from Facebook, because this is the details about your life that matters, and they also should not have the access to it. So how do you think we should solve, or what kind of technologies we should choose to help it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think to answer that question, I'll give another overview of some of the other trends that we see. So yeah, HTTPS, which is a little lock icon in the URL bar, which says like secure in your web browser, be it Chrome or Safari. That that got rolled out really because of Snowden. Thinking about it as well, I think Canberra Analytica, which was like tracking for political purposes, I think that was kind of what brought out a lot of the web browsers focus on eliminating third-party tracking cookies. And then now, yeah, we're seeing with messaging end-to-end encryption, because we've outside of USA, there's been a lot of instances where activists or company or prominent figures have been arrested or detained because of what they've been writing on unencrypted messengers. So then that's kind of got an uptick. WhatsApp partnered with Signal to kind of do their encryption for the actual message content, but WhatsApp, unlike Signal, doesn't encrypt your contacts, doesn't encrypt your when like the metadata about the messages, and it doesn't encrypt your conversations with businesses. When Signal, they're not even aware of your contacts. Even if you share your contacts with the Signal app, the company has no ability to read your contacts. They did a lot of engineering to make that possible, and it's really cool. There was a big exodus from WhatsApp to Signal, and that's definitely for the better. Fascinating work there. So I think, at least for me, like I became uber concerned with Facebook. I was just like, okay, they're going more than 1 billion users now back in 2014. I was like, no company should have access and to the ability to manipulate and see what people see for 1 billion users. Like that's more than any one government. And they're now more powerful than governments because they can manipulate people across national borders. And this is very concerning. And they have intricate data. Like, even figuring out your personalities, figuring out your preferences, figuring out your value system, figuring out your relationships even before you're aware. Even for an instance, figure out whether you're pregnant before your family or your loved ones know, because
Yeah.
from what you're searching on Google, all these type of, and that's used to sell you products. So it's to that extent, like the tech companies know more about you than your dearest loved ones, and when that data is exposed to governments or to companies or other data mining services like Cambridge Analytica, this becomes incredibly concerning. So for me, I just deleted my Facebook back in 2014. Kind of did without that. Oh, one instance is Tinder is interesting because Tinder, you're giving them a complete profile of every single thing you find attractive. So if someone wanted to send like a double agent to you or something like that, they know
Yeah.
exactly who it should look like to honeypot
Yeah.
you. Um,
Just
so-
yeah, but try to imagine that they, like at the current age, they don't even need to find to send a physical person, because they
Mm.
can literally
Oh.
create an AI non-existent face that looks like a real person, create
Mm.
a like a shadow account on Tinder or anywhere else,
Mm.
and exactly tap into your deepest desires, and then of course extract whatever information they need, or try to manipulate into like giving some additional things. There is this movie called Ex Machina,
Okay.
with
Yeah.
this vision, yeah, where an android is created, so it is a physical thing that looks like gorgeous young lady that is exactly tapped into, even more severely in this movie, where the main character kind of used whatever company connection to watch porn, and his boss essentially knew all of his sexual desires, and based on that he created this perfect android. um, and of course, yeah, it will happen, or it's already happening, but we are not aware of it so much. Most of the time I believe it's because of shame. People don't want to share this kind of stories, and don't want to be on the cover of some magazine or a newspaper, or even on Facebook, with the headline that, oh, I was tricked by sex android to pass on my money, or pass on my crypto wallet, whatever.
Right.
But this is the thing. This is the actual, danger that we are running into.
Mm. In the description below, I'll link to a video. I think it's by one of those YouTube channels. PewDiePie covers them a few times, where it's like it follows like online relationships where they met and then they got married like in 3 months, or sometimes they don't. They did a cover where there was one guy and he met like a Ukrainian girl online, and he's never met her in person, but he ended up sending her like $1,000 every month, thinking there is actually a real relationship there. Now that's an actual person playing hundreds of other men for financial rewards. But yeah, it is bots a lot of the time. Like even with the call center scams, things like that. A lot of dating websites, it's just all fake profiles and robots talking to people. And then every now and then, when the bot doesn't understand the query, then it'll go to a human who tries and figures out what the right answer is, and then it'll go back to
Yeah,
an
yeah,
automated bot. And Elon Musk company OpenAI, they have one project called GPT-3, which is able to really write convincing responses as if humans
yeah, yeah,
were. Even write, all sorts of different things, not just chats, but even paragraphs or essays. It's able to
yeah,
write from simple prompts. Um, so yeah, so at least for me, I deleted my Facebook in 2014, which I have acknowledged has been quite antisocial. Like it's harder to find meetups, it's harder to engage with like strangers in community events, things like that. Like now it's just I interact with my friends, or I have to kind of discover events myself, or through services like Meetup or whatnot. I kept Instagram for a while, because at least on Instagram, everything was public. And that's where I felt it was more honest, which is that if my data is public, mine it to hell. I don't care. However, if it
mm,
was private and you're pretending it's private when it's not actually private and
yeah,
you're mining it, then that's dodgy. But even for Instagram, I deleted my Instagram last year because I ended up realizing like uh, it's still this little dopamine addictive train, and also they're still mining everything about it. And I don't have access to any of that mined data. And this is where it became really concerning to me. I wrote a trial at this called like a constitutional clause that respects data privacy, which is essentially that a user should have ownership of any consequential data from their original data. So if you're
Yeah.
mining data about me, I should have access to that data. Not just the data I provide you, but the data you have mined from that data. I think that would go tremendously far for data privacy. And the other one is if I'm chatting with Peertrack on Facebook Messenger, which I don't think either of us have Facebook accounts, but if we were, then it should show in the messaging list that Facebook and whoever else the advertisers are listening into that message. Like they should be listed in participants to increase people's awareness. Like when I'm messaging someone on iMessage, maybe it should mention, who they are sharing those iMessages with as well. I think that would go quite far to bringing people's awareness that the person you're messaging isn't the only person reading and mining those conversations. So
yeah. And of course, if you want to keep it private, there should also be some way of understanding or digging deep what is encryption itself. Yeah. So in case of Signal, this is, I think, like the best example we have at this moment. Yeah, that it works as easy as WhatsApp, but they really it's a bit of sad story because the people who created WhatsApp then sold it to Facebook, then gained the consciousness to create a second WhatsApp that they call Signal, and they now created. Yeah. You can actually look at it. That the creators of Signal were the creators of WhatsApp originally, and they are trying to secure it to not be sold again, because all of the code is open source. The company behind it or the institution behind it is non-profit that is receiving some funds and has enough money to develop this technology and keep it free for everyone. So definitely, as you said, they are making sure that even the metadata, it's not something that they can mine or they can see. And anyone who is interested enough and want to kind of understand the technology behind it can go and just start learning about encryption, because this is like the beauty of implementing mathematics into, let's say, everyday life. Yeah, because it's not about sending encrypted message from one person to another. It's also about like securing the contents of your data on your own computer or any other device. You also mentioned that we should be able to have access to all of the data that we are generating, or even generating by accident, by byproduct of what we do every day. There is this interesting thing called Solid. Have you heard about Solid project?
Tim Berners-Lee's one, right? The creator of the World Wide Web.
Yeah. So it seems that there's another story of someone who kind of develops more consciousness after creating World Wide Web, like the founding block for all the websites that we have right now. And in his case, he understands that that data mining is such a problem that we need to have some alternative. And one thing that I heard a few weeks ago was that they finally managed to sign some papers to start working with British health system and to create this like practical situation where all of your health data is closed in the pod. This is how they call this kind of like unit about you as a person. And this pod can be shared securely with, for example, with your doctor, but he or she will only have access to this part that you are opening up. Yeah, and the moment you want to close the relationship, you want to change the doctor, you want to move on, you are the owner, and you still own all of the data on your pod. It's still quite technical. It's still a thing that you need to spend some time on it, but it's definitely a step to the right direction.
Right. And one of the European countries, they have a right to be forgotten as well, which is that you in those countries, Facebook or whatever it is provides an option where the deletion is actually like a proper deletion, not just a we're just gonna hide your account.
Yeah. It's funny that you mention it. It actually started in Spain, where I am right now. Okay. And Spain was like one of the major countries to push back. But as far as I know, it's now a rule for the whole European Union. So it doesn't matter where the data is, as long as you are a European citizen, you can demand from any company to delete your data. But you know about the technology enough to also understand that deleting anything, especially online, is a very unprecise term, because there is no such thing as perfect delete. Yeah, there is only essentially erasing the index. Yeah, the kind of information where the data is stored. But if you ever used a MacBook computer, that's kind of like a very practical way to see it. And you have the external hard drive. You are connecting it. It's a new hard drive. Like, let's say it's completely empty from the store. You are connecting it, and then you have those, I think, 4 or 5 different options of how do you want to erase your data from this hard drive. And this is exactly how you should understand how it is deleted on the internet, because the easiest, the fastest way is just like raising the index, and then whatever data you will put on, like the new movies or new pictures, whatever you want to store it, then they are actually replacing the old files. But if you want to be completely sure that this thing is completely non-readable anymore, you would need to rewrite it a couple of times, and it takes hours or even longer if the hard drive is big. So try to imagine now the same thing on the internet. And many people, including the founder of Wikipedia, was one of the key proponents, or one of the people who was objecting this idea of the right to be forgotten, because essentially it's moving the data that Google or Facebook has on you from them to those shady data brokers that still have this data, and we do not have a way to force them to show their servers or to show proof that they do not own this data anymore. And if someone is really trying to dig up the name or the whatever data that it's not visible anymore on Google, they will most probably find it still in those shady places, in those secondary backup, whatever, shadow indexes that are on the internet. So the right to be forgotten is definitely an interesting idea, but to which extent it works, it's hard to tell.
Yeah. I'm thinking about an analogy for this, which is kind of like, say for me, if I die, Peertrack, you're going to have memories about me, right? And however, you've developed those memories from me because inherently I trust you, and I've shared public information that's available to everybody, as well as some private information that I've kind of trusted you with, right? Whereas with companies, it's kind of, that same type of relationship, but then magnified to 1 billion people instead of just your friends. 1 billion people, one one robot now knows everything about them, and that robot is manipulated by the engineers who work for it and their shareholders that control those engineers. And this is where it kind of is interesting, because if Peertrack, if you die, then you're like in your will, I want a right to be forgotten by all my friends. And it will kind of be like, well, so actually some cultures do that, where you're not allowed to speak of the deceased. But for me, it would kind of be like, well, they're my memories, and I have a right to my own memories. But when we're talking about robots that we don't necessarily trust, because one, no one reads the privacy policies or the or the terms of services, but
Yeah.
mostly what they do is they're saying, you give us dual license forever of anything you give us, and we have the right to use that however we please. And that's not something that, if you were to have an interaction with a friend and then that friend was like, hey, every single secret, I'll do whatever I want with it. No, like that's not a mutual friendship there. That's not something that actually benefits
Yeah.
you. And yet that's the relationship we have with these companies. So it's with the movie, a lot of it is kind of going into kind of the legal or political and all these different aspects of how can this fight happen on all these different levels. To, hey, we built these things that were meant to be fantastic, but there's actually some cons to them. How can we really figure out these cons? And that could be through increased regulation measures, like say the right to be forgotten, or GDPR.
GDPR. Yes, yes.
Yeah, the European data thing, which is why everybody
Mhm.
in one year got emails about updated privacy policies.
Yes.
um, and yeah, all these type of increased regulation things, these can be good things to happen. But another one is, as a consumer, we can pick alternatives. So Signal is like the best one for probably calls and messaging. Like for your social messenger, Signal is there. When it comes to like events and the greater Facebook ecosystem, that's really hard to do, because a lot of the value add there is that they are where everybody is meant to be. Therefore, if you want eyeballs for your event, or you want eyeballs for your garage sale, or you want eyeballs for anything, Facebook's there. And that's where it's been really challenging for alternatives. Most alternatives are focusing on more like the activist type person, who cares about data privacy, or is aware of these issues. The biggest one that I'm aware of would be Scuttlebutt, um, created by a New Zealander called Dominic Tarr, and then the whole ecosystem have kind of taken over maintainership. But with that one, you own your data, and everyone owns kind of their data, and moderation is your own block list. You can probably subscribe to global block lists, but it's this paradigm called local first software. There's an essay I'll link to in the description, which kind of argues that in this new world of at least decentralization, in kind of what Tim Berners-Lee is kind of doing with Solid, is where our data is governed by ourselves, and then we can share that with other peers. And however, when it comes to moderation, that kind of happens on our own. And it's kind of the way social interactions actually work, where we engage with people we trust, and strangers, we can kind of become aware of it, but we can also kind of easily filter it out in our life by putting up walls around ourselves, rather than having everything just exposed to one entity and then they deciding the rule book for everybody. So there's a lot of work there, but these are very difficult problems. But these are problems that are going to take a very long time, in the same way the internet took a long time to figure out. Digital privacy is something that's going to take a long time. But immediately, like moving to Signal is like a great one. But getting off the Google system, there's like DuckDuckGo. That's a great alternative for like a search engine. What else for YouTube? There's kind of new alternatives, but they're kind of still emerging in terms of who's going to be the winner. And that's always going to be the way it goes. Like, you have a whole bunch of innovation, then it consolidates into a monopoly, and then cons or problems get out, and then you have a
Yeah.
whole bunch new, and then that'll consolidate into something. And that empire will last as long as it's futile. No, as long as it's fertile for it to continue. But as soon as it starts becoming dodgy, or something else meets someone's particular needs with their order of magnitude better outcomes, then people will move that little sub use case to that one particular thing. Um, Yeah, Discord's like a interesting one as well. Like all these kind of community type ones. Discord's interesting because its major shareholders are, I think, China for Discord, and that's something else that was raised in Social Dilemma, which is that uh, one of the issues of why that is inherently preventing Facebook or Twitter and whatnot from addressing these concerns is that there's money manipulating people's behavior, and they're companies who are legally obligated to appease shareholders. And that's one of the inherent issues with the capitalist system is that it puts, at least in the USA capitalist system, is that shareholders, you're obligated to your shareholders and you're not obligated to your users. And this is a bit of a problem. And it's probably why so many people in Silicon Valley are Marxists, just because in that ecosystem, that environment that they are in, they view the
Mhm.
Marxist concerns as the concerns they are seeing in their life, which is a consolidation of power into a minority who controls the majority. And that's something that is, but it's also the concerns of liberty as well. They both share the same concerns, like John Stuart Mill and Karl Marx. They share the same concerns but different solutions. Um, and we
Yeah.
that's a different debate, but oh, which one's
Yeah,
kind
yeah,
of
yeah.
better?
But if
Yeah.
if if I may,
Yep.
there was this interesting part when you mentioned about you being out of Facebook and Instagram now, and having some difficulties of just being notified about the new meetup, yeah, or trying to keep up, talking with some people who are not yet on Signal and are only using, for example, the Facebook Messenger. Of course, there will be always the issue of trying to convince everyone to move to this side or another. There is the whole problem of inertia, yeah, that some people grow their customs and habits so strongly that they cannot even imagine themselves not using those platforms or not using those instant messaging applications. So the best way we can kind of try to do this is just slowly but surely um, exemplify why this is better, why there is so many issues with that or this, and over time it develops. Like I can even see it with my social circle or with my family, that we managed to switch from one thing that was not that was easy but not secure enough, not privacy centered, and then we are using a better alternative. So this is something to remember, and to try to always think of it that people have been doing this for thousands of years before even the internet existed. Yeah, like we managed to find our social friends and relationships and build families and grow also our position, yeah, in those different circumstances where we can influence our neighborhood or our city or our country, and somehow steer them in the right direction. And yeah, it's also, I think, this favorite topic for any technologists, of what is better, yeah, open source or proprietary technology. Is it centralization or decentralization a thing that will prevail in the future, or what thing will be bigger or better or whatever? I don't know if you read the book Life 3.0.
No, I haven't.
Okay, so this one is about AI, and it's probably the most important book to read to understand what will come next. And the most practical thing you can now try and see how the AI works is actually by using YouTube. Yeah, because YouTube is trying to incorporate whatever they know about you from your Google account. So if you have searched about web hosting companies, they will show you videos about this topic, yeah, because it's all part of one data about you as a person. And then they have their own recommendation system and the whole subscription things and the notifications and their own separate search engine that is like, built in the platform. But this is actually a thing where you, over time, you keep digging into one topic, they will know that, oh, this topic is for you. And how to look or how to see if the AI is broken, or the the machine learning and everything they know about you is not working anymore. Just open YouTube in incognito mode, or set up a new completely separate Gmail account and try to play with YouTube again. And then you will see that they will need to learn about you again, from scratch. And it's you can steer it, if you really want to go into a rabbit hole of like all of the conspiracy theories that are existing on YouTube, you can dig in and they will be still like popping up and surfacing, and everything is going around there. So getting back to the book, The Life 3.0, it's telling a story. It's this kind of like a introduction to what can happen in the future. The thing is that we have never had a power, any emperor or any way of ruling all of the people on the whole of the planet. So like the biggest empire you can ever imagine, you can think about British Empire or like the Mongol Empire, blah blah blah. Every now and then they will break, and the reason for that is that the physical distances between one place or another is so large that even AI will most probably cannot handle it. Because if you consider how much or how fast the speed of light, like the information is coming from some central a database or central unit of this AI in the future, to the decision that is happening on the other side of the planet, it's already kind of like I think few seconds, to pass on whatever information has to go there, and it's already like too late. So there will always be some like local governments, or local elements that can adapt better to the situation they have, because it's always different when you are living on a small island somewhere in the Pacific, and then if you are living somewhere in the Sahara Desert. It's the circumstances, your needs, whatever else, the things are different, and you need to adapt to what is happening in your situation, in your place. The one thing I just want to mention, and we should definitely put a link to this, it's something called New Public. Have you heard about this?
No.
So it's a wordplay on Republic, and like one of the key people behind it was recently in a conversation in a podcast with Tristan Harris. So the people that are running Center of Humane Technology, and this is like their way of trying to develop essentially solutions that as you said, like let's imagine a Facebook that is only for a little town, or is using some of the Facebook technologies, open source or proprietary. The thing is that the people who are affected by it should govern it, should moderate it, and should decide who is allowed, what advertisement are we allowing, what are we doing with it, how do we policing it. This should definitely be on their side.
It sounds good. You showed me the link after, and I'll put in the notes. One thing I want to mention is the incognito mode, as if it's going to make it, turn you from non-anonymous to anonymous, isn't particularly correct, because the fingerprinting that they do is very good. So for instance, if you're accessing it from the same IP address, they'll link that to you. So even if let's say you have a normal browsing session that you've been using, and now you do incognito mode, they're still sending them your hardware details in terms of what support your web browser has for different things, and your IP address, the browser user agent you're using, the browser window size,
Yeah,
So
yeah,
even
yeah,
if
yeah.
it's multiple people in the same home using incognito mode, even those factors will be able to give you a fingerprint of who they are and be able to pick up sessions. So incognito mode, it does kind of give like a semblance, but if they're good, it doesn't matter at all. So that's why things like
Yeah.
Tor Browser works really well, where it's always changing the IP address. It's kind of built scripts into it kind of to prevent certain fingerprinting abilities. Safari is trying to level it up more and more
Yeah,
for the end
yeah.
user. Brave is also kind of trying to do it for the non-Apple ecosystem. Um, but if you're just
Mhm.
using things like Google or one of the other browsers, they don't really have that good fingerprinting detection. But even if you're, one of the other things is uh, VPNs, they also expose to some extent like a data privacy risk because now everything's going through this middleman, and things are being consolidated there. So is using a VPN better? Well, in some cases, yes. So for instance, if you're going to be torrenting, definitely use a VPN for that. If you're just accessing only HTTPS websites, VPN doesn't particularly matter. But if you're wanting complete anonymity, you're wanting to probably use Tor and then just never log into anything and have throwaway accounts
Yeah.
that are never linked to anything. It starts becoming very difficult, which is why a lot of focus is now going on regulatory needs. One instance where regulatory stuff has worked tremendously well is actually in health. So
Mm.
health data is quite protected in pretty much all Western countries that I'm aware of, to an extent, right? Like to the government's competency to deal with it. But Apple Health
Mm.
is interesting because Apple Health, you own the data and then you provision it to other people, and that's like the data study thing. Every now and then, Apple will reach out to, say, Americans and be like, hey, do you want to participate in this data study? And then you're actually saying, like, instead of it just being I sign up for Google and then I permit them to do any research they want on my data, instead, the
Mm.
health model that is that, hey, you have your data. Can we use it for this specific use case? And I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
that's a really cool way going forward, where it's kind of like like the self-governance of data is one of the big battles of this century. The other one is just self-governance of your locality, like the Hong Kong situation. And the Hong Kong
Mm.
situation will work into some of our other discussion points here, because a lot of the time people think if I'm doing nothing wrong, then what's the problem? Well, the problem one is
Yeah.
the dopamine and the addiction cycles and the behavior modification and the filter bubbles and echo chambers and political activation. So that's one of the problems. But we've already touched on those, and the movie touches on that quite well. But one of the other issues is that's still saying I'm doing nothing wrong. What's the problem? While I trust my existing government, and while I trust the existing actors, and these actors change. And it's kind of ProtonMail. They're like a secure email service to the best email can be secured. Ideally, use Signal. If you can't use Signal for everything, then ProtonMail is a good option for email. Otherwise, there's like things like FlowCrypt and other GP like encryption services for email. But
Mhm.
ProtonMail, they saw a huge uptake when once Trump went into election, and they wrote a blog post and they said, look, the same concerns have always been here. The only difference is that now it's liberals who are concerned rather than American conservatives. Like, yeah, now it's Democrats that are concerned with misuse of the data rather than Republicans. So it's kind of interesting because depending on who it is we're trusting in government, depends on whether or not we trust them with our data. And for instance, in Hong Kong, just because some aristocrats signed a piece of paper a few centuries ago, that nation
Yeah.
has been obliterated despite the will and its eagerness and pleas for sovereignty by its people. And that is incredibly concerning. That's one of the other battles, one of the big battles. I think it's data sovereignty, but then also political sovereignty. These are the big battles of this century. Otherwise, the situation in Hong Kong will probably happen a lot more, especially with China's expansion. Taiwan's next. And that's like a battle. It's like, do some third party, be it a company or a government, get to determine how you live. And now definitely there's aspects there in terms of, we all have to make compromises to live in a civilization. However, should the people determine that, or should some arbitrary politicians determine that? And this is things which, like, John Stuart Mill talked about, or even to some extent the Marxists were concerned about, as well as Frederick Bastiat wrote about in The Law, which is one of the issues is with democracy, especially, is that it was an improvement over feudalism, where a minority oppressed the majority. But then democracy, hey, the majority now gets to oppress the minority, and they can vote for whatever they want. So then you have tribes forming into bigger tribes to oppress other groups, using the government as the weapon. So what you have is a lot of tribal warfare eventually. It starts off consistent, but then the tribes start realizing, oh, I can use the government to lobby for my particular means. And you see companies donating millions, or aristocrats, like upper class people, also donating millions to get the way. And Tesla do it too. Like Elon Musk, as nice as he is, he's also participating in the lobbying game, and it's just accepted as this necessary evil that one has to participate in, even if they're good. And this is like a one of the flaws, and where things that move into more self-sovereignty, and the internet kind of empowers that for like the first time now, to like at low cost determine the will of a nation. When before that wasn't possible. You could never determine the will of a nation. For instance, like that was also the downfall of like the Persian Empire, as well as the Alexander the Great's Macedonian Empire, which is you have all these different tribes underneath you, and how do you meet all of their needs? You can certainly give them innovations such as trade, such as protection, such as all these other governmental responsibilities. But when it comes to these cultural or the needs and ethics of the people, it's very difficult for monopolized authorities to achieve that well. But now we can really do that, where Facebook, they know the politics and everything kind of about billions of people now. So it's one of these things which is, hey, maybe we can do that Apple Health approach, where it's like, hey, maybe we can all have our own NSA library on ourselves. We can all have the Google algorithms. Hey, Ben, what are the things I can run on me to figure out these certain outcomes on this huge data repository it has about me? Like punching questions like, what outcomes can I achieve in my life, and then it kind of gives me recommendations for that. Like, and maybe that's what Tristan Harris is doing with his Humane. What is it? Humane
Center for Humane Technology. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's
I think you touched a very interesting point. Starting with the incognito mode. The further you know about how actually the incognito mode works or doesn't work, the better you are prepared for your online activity, whatever it is. So there are two things that anyone, anywhere, anytime can use, because we can actually apply it not only for the online world. The first thing is the scramble idea. So if you are aware that if Google knows a lot about your work, a lot about your relationships, a lot about your content of whatever thoughts that you are passing on your email, due to Gmail and other apps from their ecosystem, you can always, in any moment, set up a separate account, like the ProtonMail or any other email, even in your web hosting provider. And they will not have access to this email account, or at least not straight away. So the moment you have this separate thing, and you can use it primarily to talk with, your family. For example, I am setting up this new separate account, and anything that is related about my closest circle, I want to keep it there. And of course, it's best if all of those people involved are also using this separate line of communication. And this scrambling of data allows you to be more secure in terms of what extent of data they know about you. And it also applies for any web browser. Of course, you mentioned several of them to use. I actually have many of them on my computer, and I'm switching, for one activity here, for another activity there. Therefore, I have this control over what is happening. Yeah, what kind of inputs I am putting in one screen or another screen. So there is this scrambling of data. And the other thing about diversification is that having those separate accounts, having this ability to own your data and also own your money, because if we are aware of those issues about our own governments, wherever you have been born, whatever passport you are now holding, wherever you are residing, you are to some extent controlled, and some of the governmental bodies are checking if you are not doing anything wrong. But you can always have this separate account in another country. Now with those new fintech companies, like with TransferWise, with Revolut, with many other, you can really quickly set up a new bank account that is essentially working even better than the traditional bank accounts. And you can manage your money, or you can even manage your crypto assets somewhere that is not primarily attached to the country where you have been born. And this is a very, very powerful thing. It was to very extent discussed in a book called Sovereign Individual. It's really interesting because this book was published in 1998. So they managed to foresee how a lot of technologies developed. And like the general premise is that the moment you are sovereign, you are this individual who is aware of how the big data is managed or mismanaged. You have the power, and you should always use this power to whatever extent you feel comfortable and you feel aware, and of course increase your knowledge. So the moment you realize how much of this choice you have in everyday life, then you start to realize that the big data is not the big corporations, the big tech is actually not in full control of your life.
Yeah, and it's also kind of in the same way through money. Like if you stop buying one product and start buying another product, you're transferring wealth so that other product can make more of that. And it also inspires a different market shift as well, where competitors will realize a certain change, and then they'll also start getting in on that action. So the same kind of thing happens with users. When users move, people realize it's important to kind of do so. It's really hard for like data privacy to do it well. I think IETF, that organization, and the EFF, those are two organizations that EFF is probably the big one. I think maybe that's the one Snowden works for, but there's oh no, Snowden's the Freedom for the Press Foundation, a different one.
Yes. But he also published some articles on the Electronic Frontier Foundation, the EFF.
Right. Yeah. So they have guides to kind of go into like some of the issues, because if Tor's great because each different browser, like it's doing what scrambling is kind of something you do, but then mixing is something that the protocol can do. So mixing merges the request with a bunch of others to kind of provide that anonymity, and Tor is kind of great for that. But once you log in a tab and then you log into a different one, Tor is kind of, because of that mixing, has like better defenses against that. In terms of linking those two accounts. But it's also important to realize like Facebook owns WhatsApp, owns Snapchat, owns they own Snapchat, they own Instagram, they own Facebook.
No, Facebook didn't buy Snapchat.
Oh, they don't.
Yet.
Oh, Snapchat.
they are just copying all of the features. Yeah, but it isn't really important. Yeah, like it doesn't matter if it's owned by a big tech or not.
Right.
It's still part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, it's just that, they would, my point is they would merge it all easier. I think you're, so It's kind of so yeah. There's a lot of stuff to go there. Okay, we're let's see what's some of the final stuff
I
we can.
think we can just quickly touch the situation in these three different places. Yeah, in
Okay.
China, Hong Kong, in Taiwan,
Yeah.
because while Social Dilemma, the documentary, is focused on the Western world and anyone who is living, doesn't matter if it's Europe or California, where now they are introducing and really enforcing those privacy laws, or elsewhere where the privacy laws are not strong enough. You can like feel as part of this world, yeah, as part of this Facebook / Google dominion, and finding some alternatives. But it's a completely different story in terms of China as a mainland China, and then the territories that China is, of course, claiming that it's theirs, Taiwan and Hong Kong. But those two places are developing their history in a very different way. Yeah, like if we use the technical terms, the fork that happened in the beginning of the 20th century, it's still prolonging. Yeah. As you mentioned, that somewhere some time ago, some aristocrats signed some papers, and now Hong Kong has been a part of Britain, and now is back to China, and therefore there are many issues about this. And Taiwan managed to be this separate entity, but it's
Yeah.
very hard to tell if they are a country, if they are not a country, what is their actual legal status internationally. So yeah, what do you think about it?
Yeah, so the Hong Kong one, as I say, like the right, like the universal human right that all countries should band together to do is a right to, well, one would be data sovereignty, but that's will be
Mm-hmm.
progressive. But I think when it really comes to in-person action, is the right to political sovereignty, and
Yeah.
and because the issue with Hong Kong is it's like, in a democracy we still have the illusion that we can go and vote for something and it reflects the majority. But in Hong Kong, the majority are against what happened. And that's where it
Mm.
becomes terrifying. Like a few aristocrats 200 years ago is now completely against the majority. And no one did anything. Like in terms of the rest of the world to try and help in that situation. Uh, and China Uncensored and China Unscripted, they go a lot into kind of the politics of it. There's two podcasts that I want to shout out from China Unscripted, number 31 and number 55 with Joshua Phillips. They go very
Mm.
intensely into the founding of the political issues within China. So there was a Communist Party, the People's Republic of China, which is the modern mainland China. And then there was the Republic of China, which they fled to Taiwan. So there was a
Yeah.
kind of a warfare happened. Japan invaded, and then once Japan left, then the people, the Republic of China, fled to Taiwan and have kind of continued. So they both consider themselves the real China, and both want to. And Taiwan, they're now kind of saying, let's just try and stay Taiwan, that rather than ever hope to reclaim mainland China. But it's still kind of up in the air. Whereas mainland China, they're very much like, we want Taiwan back, and that's where like
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
eyes
Yeah.
are pointing to. And that's also why, like on Twitch, it was no, was it? Yeah, it was on Twitch as well as like World of Warcraft, I think, where there was that meme that was like Taiwan #1, and people started getting their accounts banned and blocked. Which is that a lot of the time, with because there's so much money in China, companies are like, yeah, we'll do what it takes to get that money, to get access to that 1.3 billion people. We want access
Mm.
to them. But it's an illusionary access that they get as well, because there's no like copyright laws. Like any
Exactly.
business over 50 people owned like have to cooperate with the Communist Party. So it's like the Communist Party also commits like a genocide with the Uyghur people, like very, very bad authoritarian regime. And
Mm-hmm.
but and they have a unbelievably strong propaganda department as well, and also engage in like cold cyber warfare, like political instability. So like part of the stuff here is like all this interest in like tribe versus tribe stuff in the West, or like I need to become more and more focused on politics. Like, is that serving your nation, or is that serving the destruction of your nation so China can benefit, or Russia or
Mm.
some other foreign party? These are like really, really interesting concerns. I'm considering to some extent maybe moving to Taiwan just to be like, I'm with you guys. Like
Mm-hmm.
like there's another great documentary on Epoch Times about a Falun Gong practitioner, and about her experience, like just standing up for her religion, and like her peaceful religion, and going through
Mm.
decades of torture. And and you watch even like the Tiananmen Square documentary. There's a great one on Amazon Prime, and you realize like these people, like they have more courage than anyone in the West I think has ever had. Like
Yeah.
millions of people are doing what like Snowden did, and the other whistleblowers. Like they are fighting
Mm.
against like a regime uh, because they think it's the right thing to do,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's amazing. And like you have a threat there where like I will imprison you and your family and torture them, and like they still
Yeah.
fight because they know that if they don't, it's just going to get worse. And I think it's
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so fascinating, because like even in the West, like we have some privileges here where it's like, okay, we're not under an authoritarian regime, at least to our knowledge. And we like, it's kind of, if we're not standing up for these people, then it that threat will move because it shows that it's profitable to do. And it's something that I think the world and people need to take a stage. There's one of the things they suggest is like stop buying things from China and buy things from Taiwan instead, or just
Mm.
like diversify your investments, because as long as money's going to China, unfortunately, it's funding the this authoritarian regime.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, there's yeah, I don't know. That's my thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's very important to distinguish between the political powers in those three places, yeah, and the people who are actually living there and they are trying to have a decent life. So of course, in China, we can hear that this infinite amount of stories of how bad the government is, and yeah, like I definitely recommend to start this whole conundrum, or start understanding the culture, start to understand where they actually stand right now, from those two podcasts that you mentioned, and we'll link them in the comments below, in the section below. So this is the part where you start from those kind of philosophical ideas of how the social structure should actually be created. Yeah, because China, for most of their history, was just an empire. Yeah, like there was an emperor or a king or some dynasty just ruling over peasants. Yeah, not citizens. Yeah, they were never called themselves part of the country. They were just labor. Yeah, for whatever the kings were commanding them. And very rapidly, the 20th century was this huge shift from one system to another. The new system, whatever they will be calling them, it's not the point of our conversation here, if it's communism or not. The thing is that China has developed one version for their society. Then Hong Kong, because it was so influenced by the Western culture, by the Western standards, developed a very different view of what can you do, what can you say, how can you govern yourself, even though that Hong Kong people never also had a chance to vote directly for their representatives. There is this like very weird system of like an appointed prime minister or something like this. The thing is that the current people in power are appointed directly by Beijing and by people in China, and therefore there is a lot of issues between the Hong Kong people, again by the citizens, and the ruling party, and then Taiwan, which is exactly as you said, the people who believed in a different way of creating their social structure, and they do have this very functioning democracy, with a lot of protests, with a lot of ways to kind of take over the right to vote, the right to be represented, and now developing technologies to facilitate those ideas and voting for ideas and implementing new laws and new rules for everyday life. So it's a really fascinating way of just using the technology, using the culture in a different way, in a different setting. And yeah, if you ever have a chance to move to Taiwan to spend there some time, I also recommend it. I was there just a month a few years ago, and it's a fascinating island, and the culture, the people is, for me, honestly, this is like the best version of Chinese culture that you can get, because they are very welcoming. They are very aware of how the world looks outside. They are willing to learn other stuff and be open for different ideas. And that's not the case for people in China.
And it's more of a continuation of the traditional Chinese culture as well. Like, it's not a new language.
Yes.
It's traditional Chinese. It wasn't like with mainland China, like the Marxists, like they or communists, whatever the right terminology is, but yeah, it's the Communist Party of China. They deliberately destroyed all the ancient civilization as much as they could,
exactly.
and banned the traditions, and even changed the language, like the Orwellian 1984 language change, like the Newspeak, like that is simplified Chinese. Like, it's like, how can we also set up borders even through language? And that's an important factor. So I think in terms of a Western, I think it's one of the concerns here is like, well, it doesn't affect me, but it's like, well, are you good just for your friends, or are you good for like for the larger group of people? And I think it's like, this technology is global. So it's like, if we focus on these things, even in the West, our technology makes its way across the world, and their technology hopefully makes it to us as well. So it's like, if we focus on privacy here, it also benefits the people under these regimes even more so. So we get the benefit, but it changes lives over there. As you mentioned earlier with encryption and even cryptocurrency. Like, cryptocurrency is a godsend to people facing hyperinflation. Like, it is actually a way they can actually engage from a money that isn't arbitrarily governed. Like, with cryptocurrency, the big innovation is this is now verifiably governed. It's in the protocol of how it's governed. It can be held accountable because it's coded, right? And whereas normal money, it's like you trust the government, and then they can just print as much money as they want, bail it out, whoever's failing, do whatever they want, take loans from other governments. It's kind of interesting, actually, the World War history, like Americans' involvement, which was just like, just give everybody loans, and then only intervene when it seems like they can't pay
and
back
see what
loans.
happens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's it's kind of fascinating. Whereas crypto, you could still have the loans, but at least everything's there's not the issue of arbitrary inflation, and that's a godsend for so many people. So it's like, if we campaign for these things, not only do we benefit and get minor improvements on our lives, but also we significantly change the lives of those who are under authoritarian regimes. Plus, it also helps give us defenses if our government or companies become antagonistic to us, which, like, say for myself, I have like a YouTube addiction that I try and fight. Like even, a common example, you go to, do the toilet or you eat a meal and you end up watching a 10 or 15 minute video. but those tasks only take like 3 minutes. Like you just lost 7 minutes of your life. Like, so every single time it's like a little distraction. Like you turn 3 minutes into 10 minutes and it's costing you your life. Like, alrighty. So with that, I'll thank Peertrack so much for joining. I'll link all the descriptions below. I'll link your blog post as well as going through it. It's exhaustive, like,
awesome.
like, and very beneficial. Like you've covered pretty much like so much in there. It's worth checking out. So I'll link everything related to our conversation below. And yeah, thanks so much, Piotrek, for joining me. I'm very happy we had this discussion.
Thank you very much. I was also very pleased to have this conversation.